We heard that.
Be careful, huh? Nothing to sleep. If not, the microphones are on.
This conference will now be recorded.
Okay. Okay, can you hear me? Okay, the chair sees a quorum, and let's call the Thursday, October 7th, 2021 Medical Marijuana Commission meeting to order. And let's go to the first item on the agenda, and that's approval of the minutes from the last meeting.
This is Commissioner Russell, and I've read the minutes, and I make a motion that we approve them.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
All right. Ayes carried. All right, let's move to the next item on the agenda, and it's notice items.
The first notice item is permit number 83 of Sage Creek Cultivation has submitted a change of floor plan. Also, permit 329 Dark Horse Medicinal has submitted a change of floor plan as well.
Okay, these items are just notice items, so we will not take a vote on them. So let's go on down to change of ownership. First one is permit 88.
Permit 88 Natural State Medicinals has counsel and representation here. This is one that has been submitted as opposed to being on a change of ownership form, a change of information form. It is a little bit different. It's not a purchase and sell situation. And I'll let counselors explain that.
We identify yourself for the record.
Good afternoon, Robin Ramon with the Harper Law Firm on behalf of Natural State Medicinals. I'm joined today by Mr. Robert DeBen, who is the President and CEO of Natural State Medicinals. On the computer, we have Mr. Perry Wilson, who's also the Harper Law Firm, appearing on behalf of Medicinals.
Okay, and
Thank you. I'm Danny Crabtree, attorney here in Little Rock. I represent Drs. Scott and Kelly Schlesinger, who are members of Natural State Medicinals.
okay. Dorleen, do you want to start?
I would just want, since they have representation on both sides of this issue, to let them start.
Yeah, so, thank you. So let me explain what has happened. This is admittedly an unusual transaction. I might suggest it's the first time this type of issues come before the commission. The specific corporate action that has taken place is called, just for shorthand, the for-cause redemption. And in essence, the entity, NSMC OpCo, which is the holder of the license, has redeemed the membership interests of two of its members based on cause. And that has a very specific meaning that's set forth within all governing documents. In particular, they're redeeming the membership interests of Scott and Kelly Schlesinger, two of the members. They each held approximately 11.5% of the outstanding membership interest of NSM prior to the redemption. And after the redemption, they will hold 0% of NSM. There was a formal resolution that was circulated amongst the membership. That resolution set forth the basis for the redemption. It was formally voted on by the membership and achieved a supermajority vote, which is a threshold set forth in the governing documents to approve that particular action. Exhibit A to the change of information form that we supplied has a written description of the redemption process. It also shows the before the redemption ownership of each of the members, and then after the redemption ownership of each of the members. It's important to understand that there is no buyer and seller involved in this transaction. This is essentially the corporation, or I'm sorry, the LLC, redeeming those membership interests back into its registry. So nobody's interests that remain in the entity are increasing their membership interests. It's just by virtue of there being less outstanding membership interest, their ratable percentage is increasing. Now we submitted this because of the unusual nature of this transaction. We submitted it as a change in information form. As you know, Rule 15, which governs those types of forms, requires notice, and as you mentioned before, doesn't really require an affirmative vote. It's merely a notice item. We thought that was the most appropriate thing because it didn't fit within any of the specific requirements in Rule 16, which governs transfer of licenses. Now, I'm happy to, one thing that Rule 15 change of information does require is to demonstrate, well, let me back up. First, we believe this falls within 15C6 of Rule 15, which basically says it's any matter constituting, quote, any other change that may affect the licensee's qualifications for licensure. So it's not changing floor plan, it's not changing, it's just one of these catch-all, it might change our qualifications for licensure. And I'm happy to walk through sort of the math about why it does not change our qualifications for licensure. But the broader picture is essentially that by removing Kelly and Scott Schlesinger, it would not affect either our minority makeup or our female makeup. And so all the points would remain essentially the same. In fact, our female ownership increases slightly as a result of the removal of those. So on the whole, there is no change in our eligibility to be licensee. So like I said, under Rule 15, there's no required action by the MMC. And that's what our belief is. This is a Rule 15 change in information. It does not fit within Rule 16. And there's really no action that the commission needs to take other than to simply take notice of the redemption. Now, I suppose that by virtue of the fact that this is on the agenda as a change of ownership, that either the ABC or perhaps Sarah has a slightly different take on what this should be. I'm happy to address that, or I'm happy to let whoever wants to make that case. But our case is it's Rule 15 change of information, no vote required. It's merely a notice item.
Sarah, what's your position on
This
that?
didn't work out, and it was a great change of ownership. I did try to reach out to council a couple of times. I would think, you're losing 2 owners. I think you're transferring part ownership from 2 people back to the company. So I don't understand how that's not a transfer of license.
And I totally understand the inclination to view it in that light. I think almost every other transaction that's to come before this commission that involves some form of transfer of the license is considered a transfer of ownership. It's a very natural thing to do, but I would urge you to look at actually what Rule 16 says and how this might fit in there. So Rule 16 is the MMC licensing rule that governs how you transfer ownership. And so I think what most transfers go by is Rule 16b. It says a licensee may not sell, transfer, or otherwise dispose of his or her license to another individual without approval from the commission. So first of all, licensee isn't defined anywhere in these rules, but let's sort of play the game of imagining who the licensee might be. If NSM is the licensee, NSM is not selling, transferring, or otherwise disposing of his or her license to another individual, so it does not apply. But let's take it in a different tack and say the Schlesingers are the licensee. In that case, they're not selling, transferring, or otherwise disposing of his or her license to another individual. They're doing nothing. This is an involuntary redemption. That provision does not apply based upon just the plain language of the rules. Now, you might also argue that Rule D, 16D is in some way, what Rule D says is an individual who holds a license through his individual agent shall not make any modifications to the individual's ownership, board members, or officers as designated in the individual application without approval from the commission. So it's unclear who that individual is supposed to be, but if it's NSM, again, NSM is not making any modification through its individual agent. So I'm not sure how there's no individual agent involved here. NSM holds the license directly, so that rule wouldn't apply to NSM. And if the Schlesingers are the individual, again, they don't hold through an individual agent unless you consider NSM the individual agent. But again, you have to stretch those words to mean something that aren't on the page. So those are really the only two bases for including this transaction into a Rule 16 transfer of license. I struggle to say what this is unless we really strain the actual language of the rule. So I totally understand what Sarah's saying that this feels like a transfer of license in some way because you're losing two members. But that's not this transaction. There's no seller, there's no buyer. There's a company effecting a corporate process to redeem its interests. It's not buying it, it's not selling it, it's coming back into the registry. And as a result of that, they're voting two fewer members. But when we're talking about the regulatory process of approving that transaction, you have to look at the rules. Rule 16 does not capture the transaction, even if you could consider it some kind of change of ownership of license.
Okay, may I address it? Thank you.
If you would, state your name for the record.
Sure, Danny Crabtree again, represent Drs. Scott and Kelly Schlesinger. It sounds like the folks at NSM want to push this through as a notice item as opposed to a change of ownership. I'm sure that's tactical, but they don't want to require an approval of that change of ownership here today, which is why these sorts of arguments are being made. Regardless of whether the commission treats it as a notice or a change of ownership, I'm respectfully asking on behalf of Dr. Scott and Kelly Schlesinger that no action be taken. If it's treated as a notice item, that the notice not be recognized by the commission, or if it's being treated as a change of ownership, that be passed, either denied outright or passed to a future date. For these reasons, as they've admitted, this is not a voluntary transfer or sell of Drs. Scott and Kelly Schlesinger's membership interest. This is a unilateral move that has been made by certain members at NSM to try to force them out. I won't dig into the details of the operating agreement, but the actions that are taken violate the operating agreement. The allegation is, and it's nothing more than an allegation. The allegation is that Drs. Scott and Kelly Schlesinger have somehow committed a for-cause violation of the operating agreement. That's just not the case, and they can't prove it. In fact, we believe that this is a retaliatory move because Scott and Kelly Schlesinger have alleged that Mr. DeBen and other members of NSM have on their side committed for-cause violations of the operating agreement. And in fact, they passed their own resolution as the sole remaining members of NSM to remove everyone else other than Scott and Kelly Schlesinger. Although they didn't take this step and see, because this is in litigation, they didn't take this step and try to come before the commission and ask the commission to address this because it's premature. There is a lawsuit pending as of today. It's a verified complaint for injunctive relief by Dr. Scott and Kelly Schlesinger versus NSM, Dr. Alonzo Williams, Susan Williams, Mr. DeBen, and the other members of NSM. That lawsuit was filed on September 23rd, 2021. It's pending in front of Judge Herb Wright in Circuit Court, and it specifically addresses the very issue that we're on here today, and that is whether the folks at NSM have the right to unilaterally remove Dr. Scott Kelly Schlesinger as members of NSM. There is also an arbitration action, and I'll be happy to provide copies of any of this to anyone that wants to see it. There's also an arbitration action that is pending. This is the arbitration demand that was filed with AAA, and it was filed approximately 2 weeks ago as well. So we have two different actions that address this very issue. It's frankly, I didn't find out about this notice item or request for change of ownership until about 3 hours ago. And we were just lucky to find out about it. No notice was provided to myself or Dr. Scott and Kelly Schlesinger about this agenda item being put on today. We were lucky to find out and be here. That seems a bit unfair. I'm asking this commission, again, to deny any request for change of ownership and to, if this is treated as simply a notice item, that the notice not be recognized today. And I think
So this is under current litigation right now.
that's correct. And I believe the appropriate course to take would be to await a circuit court judge or an arbitrator's ruling on this very issue before any further action is taken.
Yeah, the commission has historically not involved itself in internal disputes between, members.
Right.
Like I said, I thought that this had been worked out regarding the exchange of information versus transfer of ownership. I did try to reach out to council, I'm a little bit sandbag right now, but, my suggestion is that the commission let them work it out if they can, let the court make a decision, and then bring it back. And maybe at that time, there won't be the need for the discussion on change of ownership versus transfer. And I also think that anyone who has been involved with the commission knows that getting rid of owners would count as a transfer of ownership. So that's, without having a chance to look at it more in detail or talk to council, that's kind of where I am on it right now. But like I said, I suggest table and let the parties try to work it out.
Commissioners that are online, do you guys have any questions?
I don't want to short circuit that. Obviously, if there's questions, I'm happy to answer them. I would like to just sort of give you my perspective on pending lawsuits.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. Apologies. Admittedly, there are other actions that are pending. They involve a great number of issues, but those issues represent this issue represents about 1% of what is at issue in the various matters that council has brought up. It is a small piece of it. It is obviously a piece of it, but it's a very small piece of it. Let me just also, again, I keep going back to the rules on this issue. What we're talking about here is regulatory approval, a process that is essentially a corporate action. We're not asking you to decide the merits of the underlying lawsuit. We're not asking you to opine on the facts giving rise to any of those claims. This is merely a process that the regulators are charged with, and the rules for getting approval are set forth in the MNC licensing rules. And if you want to call this a transfer of license, we're not trying to hide the ball here. The change of information seemed like the best fit for this. If we want to call this a transfer of ownership, that's fine. We still meet the requirements. The requirements are pretty simple, actually. You have to basically submit it on a form that's approved by the agency. Well, we've done that. It's the applicable form. We have to provide you with, there's no seller here and there's no buyer here. So the additional information that you would normally get in the transfer of ownership, there's nothing to supply, like the new background information, things like that. Now, there's one thing that is clearly not among the list of requirements in Rule 16 is there pending litigation or is there related litigation? It's not in the rules. It's also not in the application that would accompany transfer of ownership information. And the reason that information is not included is because it's wholly irrelevant to whether the regulatory approval that we're seeking is appropriate. And there's nothing in the rules that would suggest that our transfer or change of information is somehow less valid because there's pending litigation. And I'm going to mention a case because I think it's important, and some people may know it here, some people may not. But this is the Richardson versus City of Little Rock Planning Commission case, Arkansas Supreme Court from the late 80s. Basically, the Planning Commission in Little Rock denied an application for preliminary plat based upon standards that were not set forth in the ordinance. They just created new standards on the fly, and they denied the plat. What the Supreme Court said is that is, as a matter of law, arbitrary. And so I understand council's point that there's pending litigation, and obviously we're going to have to deal with that. But It's not part of the rules. It's not part of the standards that are set forth in the agency's application. That's not the information we provide. There's no notice requirement in any of this stuff. I understand you're only talking about 3 hours, but that's not part of the process. So, that's not really on us. But what I'm saying is you can approve our request and it will have no presidential weight on that litigation. It will not affect that litigation in any way. It will not validate
What
it.
we'll do is probably pull the MMC in as an additional defendant.
Certainly not if it's a change of information of which you simply taken notice. There's no basis.
Okay, well, again, this is something that I wish we had a chance to get together and discuss.
I apologize. I know you didn't try.
That's why, I suggest.
Let me go ahead and stop it for everyone on this, since you've only had, 3 hours notice, and I want to make a recommendation to table it till, further notice till the beginning of the issue.
Let me have a chance to look into the issues that Mr. Lamont is raising.
And commissioners online, do you have any questions for anybody here, or?
I do not.
I don't.
Commissioner Thomas? Well, I want to go ahead and make a motion to table permit 88 until further notice.
I would second that, Commissioner Russell.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Motion carries. So we'll table permit 88 for now.
Is there a specific process you'd like us to follow to reinitiate the request for?
You work with Sarah and Dorley, and whenever the case comes out, whenever it's ruling, you think that's fair to say?
I didn't know about any of this until tonight, so, I need to look at it and the rule and, I don't know.
How about this? We'll work with Sarah and we'll talk about bringing it up at the next meeting, and what's November 4th? 4th, yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah, this is just a company buying back its own shares, redeeming them. I don't know what it is. Is that all right?
Well, it's a necessary regulatory step. So until we receive that regulatory approval, it's sort of inchoate.
Sounds like it's gonna be anyway.
Well, no, that's a collateral attack after the fact. We would like to complete this corporate action so that we can sort of close that chapter. Now, that goes, there's a bunch of other things, not just this. So, that, who knows how long that'll take.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you all.
Okay, let's move on down to 113, Natural Root Wellness.
Permit number 113, Natural Root Wellness of Fayetteville, has 2 things going on. It is a transfer of ownership. We have an attorney, Rayburn Green, online to speak to this transfer of ownership. It is a 100% ownership purchase by Jay Truelove, along with a notice of name change if the sale goes through tonight, changing the name to Osage Creek Dispensary. Contained in your packets and sent out this afternoon was a consent signed by all 3 owners of Natural Root Wellness to that purchase transfer.
Do we have anybody online to speak to this?
Mr. Rayburn Green is online.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for allowing me to speak to you. This is what we hope to be an easier one to review. It's a completely voluntary transfer whereby the 3 members of Natural Root Wellness of Fayetteville LLC have agreed to a transfer of their assets to Osage Creek Dispensary LLC that's owned entirely by Jay Truelove. Of course, Jay is a minority owner in Osage Creek Cultivation LLC. This will be a separate business owned entirely by him. He will be substituted in all respects. for all of the roles previously performed by the by 3 members of Natural Root Wellness of Fayetteville. He will assume the application in its current form or with those requirements that you have approved, subject only to a proposed change of name to Osage Creek Dispensary LLC. I have Mr. Truelove with me, and he and I are open to answering any questions. It is a voluntary transfer in all respects.
Commissioners, do you have any questions?
No
I
question.
don't think, no.
Everything okay, Bob? Yes.
Everything is good from a legal perspective.
Well, everything good on everything? Well, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a
Commissioner, I'll
motion to accept.
We have a motion on the table and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. So the change of ownership of permit 113 Natural Root Wellness has been approved.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let's move on down to permit 198.
Permit 198, Crop is requesting a change of ownership. This clarification of the documents that have been provided to the commission. In the document packet, the new ownership and capital contributions exhibit A lists 33.3% ownership between Pop Tart LLC, ENR LLC, Robin Hood LLC. We have read to council, he has clarified that because that leaves 0.1% unaccounted for, that is supposed to be a distribution of 33 1/3 as opposed to 33.3 as set out in that document. We have also gotten a list of the owners at 100% owned. Each one of these corporations is 100% owned by the individual signing the documents herein. And we have vetted those individuals, background checks, tax clearance, and so they have met all of the ABC requirements for approval.
You want to go ahead, Casey?
I had nothing to add, Mr. Chairman, here on behalf of Mediator LLC, asking the transfer ownership be approved.
All looks good legally.
Commissioners, do you have any questions?
No.
Seeing no questions, I'll make a motion to approve permit 198, change of ownership.
Second.
We have a motion on the table and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. All right, permit 198, change of ownership has been approved. Next item on the list is a transfer of location. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Case.
The chairman has recused himself on this matter, so whether you want to take this over on permit 258.
A permit 258 3J Investments is currently located in Lamar, Arkansas, has submitted a request to move to Crawford County, Van Buren. It is all within the same zone, so there's not an attempt to move zones. We do have, and was provided to you today, their objection letter to it moving from Lamar due to the economic impact of it to Lamar. And that letter is contained in your packet. 3J Investments is represented by Alex Gray. He's here to speak to the request to transfer.
Oh, that's great.
Hello, Commissioner. We had a meeting a couple months ago, and this was an attempt or request moved to Russellville in Zone 4. Based on the discussion, I think it was a lengthy discussion we had. We looked at where all of the patients were in Zone 4. We looked at where all the dispensaries were in Zone 4, and trying to listen to what the commission is telling me to do. And it sounded like that a move to Crawford County and Van Buren was kind of telegraphed as one that would be acceptable. So based on that, my client found a location in Van Buren And we are requesting to transfer the location there. And currently, and we've all slept since then, but in Crawford County, there are 0 dispensaries in Crawford County. In all of kind of the western portion of Zone 4, there's only 1 dispensary, and it's in Sebastian County and Fort Smith. So this would be the 2nd dispensary in the western part of Zone 4. And there are currently 3 dispensaries, Morrilton, Russellville, and Clarksville, which is Johnson County, which is where Lamar is also located. So this would result in the 5 dispensaries in Zone 4, having the most access points for all the patients.
Everything looks good legally.
Excuse me?
Everything looks good legally.
Okay. You know where I stand on this. We've been down this road. What is wrong with Lamar? Y'all picked this their application. And you have any, we're under construction, we started the business there, or is it a move? Or, is there actually an operating business in Lamar?
Can I ask a question real quick? I'm sorry, Commissioner Case, did you recuse?
No.
Okay. Please.
Yeah, I'm still in the game.
Okay.
Don't worry.
Come on. Okay. Can't hear this thing. The location in Lamar, you're absolutely correct. In the application, when it was submitted, Lamar was the location that was picked. There's a raw piece of land in Lamar where the address. This dispensary was issued after, it was the 5th dispensary awarded in Zone 4. So there were the initial 4 that were awarded in, let's say, January of 2019. This was awarded in December of 2020. So 2 years later almost. And when these applications were submitted, nobody or anybody else was applying for or who would get awarded the licenses. So you have a situation where in Zone 4, the licenses where you have kind of this cluster in what I just call the River Valley, kind of the Polk County, Conway County, Johnson County area, where you have currently there are 4. That's where the license is located, and you have 1 in the western portion of Zone 4. And so, seeing where there are 350 patients in all of Johnson County, and there's 1 dispensary that's operating, and then this license. And so there's 1,620, I think, 1,620 patients in Crawford County, and there's 0 dispensaries. Sebastian County has, I think, a higher number than that. I mean, there's approximately 4,000, 4,500 patients in all of the western portion of, where the most population is in Zone 4. And so it just makes sense for patients to have access easier in the western portion. And just from a business standpoint, there's an established dispensary there already, and so we're just trying to spread it out. I mean, essentially. So that's, but I mean, I do understand the question. This is where you apply for, and so it's, and I think that's kind of why this process is in there, where people can move, or request to move is for these reasons. I mean, if you look at Zone 3, there are 3 dispensaries in West Memphis, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It's a big zone, but that's where they all apply for. So we're just trying to spread out, not be on top of the other dispensaries.
Anybody need a copy of the map?
No. Got a year on that. Okay, I have no more questions. Council seems to be good with it. Commissioners online, I'll entertain a motion or questions on this matter, if you have any.
I would like to know the distance that the proposed location would be from the nearest dispensary in the county or in the adjacent county.
Yep, we are, as the crow flies, I believe we're about 10 miles from the other dispensary in Fort Smith, and that's a direct line. Now, in terms of like travel time, I'm sure it's 15 minutes or so. But this location is right off Interstate 40. It's one of the first exits when you would come over from, or it's one of the last exits as you would leave Arkansas to Oklahoma. And so the other one is, I believe, is in South Fort Smith, and this is kind of I don't want to say North Van Buren because it may be the middle of Van Buren, but it's, right on the interstate.
Okay, and being in Lamar, what's the closest dispensary to you there?
I believe I would have to look exactly what exit the other Clarksville dispensary is, but it can't be more than, 10 miles or so, I would think, or if that. I don't, Commissioner Thomas, I don't have the exact distance on that. I apologize.
No, that's fine. That gives me an idea. Thank you.
Commissioners, are there any other questions? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion on this matter. A little quiet out there.
What do you motion one way or another, guys?
All right, I'll make a motion to approve the move.
I'll second Commissioner Russell.
We have a motion, a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right.
Aye.
No. Carries anyway. 3-0. 3. Phil, we had 3 ayes, 1 no, me.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
All right, let's move to the next item on the agenda, and that is going to be the rule modification.
Okay. Last time, we had some, I presented you guys with some proposed language. Normally wanted to take a deeper dive and make some suggestions. Norley and Chip and I have worked, to iron out any issues. I think there might still be a couple. But if you like, I can walk you through, what I submitted to the commission for consideration. Okay? With regard to the, section 5 dispensary, for each one's the last two dispensary. Okay? What I would suggest you do is jump to page 31. Okay, it's 31 on the bottom of the page, not 31 on your Adobe PDF. Okay? Kind of the heart of this matter is 9G2. All right? This states that unselected applications from the initial application period that were scored and for which the applicant or his representative did not request a refund are going to stay in reserve until 5 licenses have been awarded in a particular zone. Okay? So everything's going to kind of go back to that. So going back to page 1 on 2D, I have some suggested language here to make it clear that under this particular scenario, there doesn't need to be a public notice. Dorley took my language, played with it, I played with it. And so now we think that the language, I think we agree on this, will work. Okay, so when the commission determines that new licenses are available and appropriate, the commission will notify the public at large by legal notice that it will be accepting applications unless the new license will be selected from the reserve list described in 9G2. Okay? And as I go through this, everybody, please feel free to stop me if you have questions. Okay, going over to page 22. This is Dorley's suggestion, I'm going to speak for her. I think that she just wanted to clarify that once new applications are solicited, no applications will be accepted after 90 days of the publication date if publication is required. So I think really to avoid any kind of confusion there. Okay, going over to page 23. Under C, this is some language that Dorley added. Dorley, please feel free to speak up if you want to.
This language is added because there is a requirement that the surety bond remain in place until they are licensed. So what we have seen historically is that because we issued those refunds out, there's no longer that surety bond in place. And this language would prohibit them from simply considered a viable applicant. So we added in section 3, which says an applicant's 1/2 application fee has been returned by the Department of Finance Administration. That allows them to get rid of that surety bond. So if they have just canceled that surety bond, this allows them to be considered a viable applicant because this gives them permission to take that action. Because the other action where they withdrew an application, where the application was denied by the commission, or they were selected and paid the dispensary fee. So this just covers that gap that was of a concern because those license fees, 1/2 refunds were issued back in March, April.
Okay, and jumping over to page 27. This is some language that was Dorley's idea. The language. And Dorley, you want to explain? Or you want me to?
So this is under 7, an application fee. If litigation has been in place, as well as the language in the rule is that you do not have a viable application if we do not have an fee that has been paid in with at the time you filed your application. And so we made the exception that an unselected application is set forth in section 59G2 and for which $3,750 was refunded to the applicant shall be considered a complete application upon the payment of an amount equivalent to the $3,750 as allowed by these rules. So that allows them the opportunity, if the commission refunded that money because of the end of the time period, the 24 months, refunded all that money. This will allow them to still be considered a viable application upon the payment of that $3,750 back to the Medical Marijuana Commission.
Okay, jumping over to page 31. I've already explained G2. Then under H1, if the commission determines that more licenses should be issued in a zone with no more than 4 licenses have been awarded, you follow these steps listed here in order to get a license, okay? The next high scoring applicant of the unselected ones, those on the reserve list, would have 7 days from the date of the commission's written offer, which is described in H1, to provide the following. And we have here a check for the outstanding amount of the original application fee, payment of the dispensary license fee that's required by section 10A of 510A, the performance bond as described in section 510C, and an affidavit swearing that the applicant continues to meet the requirements listed here using the same requirements that we discussed last time. Nothing's changed there. Then under B, if the applicant timely provides that information, the applicant will be awarded the license. Now C is where Dorley and Chip and I have the, I think, greatest amount of disagreement.
Sarah, just let me interject. We do have a disagreement on the sections on subdivision A and B. On B, Chip and I have discussed it and feel that the requirements set forth in section 510 should be held out under section B as the applicant timely provides the information required in subsection A, along with meeting the requirements set forth in 510. And we feel that those need to be set out and separately from the, just being said, you have to pay the license fee and you have to pay the bond because there are other requirements in section 10 that we want to have tied in, and we feel it's best to tie it in under B. You have to meet the requirements of A and you have to meet the requirements of section 10.
And my issue with that is I totally agree that they, need to be complied with, but it's the timing of it. A lists, okay, this is what you have to do to get the license, okay? If you look over at 10, it has some provisions that deal with what you have to do to get the license, but then it also contains provisions about what happens after you get the license. So in the language, I understand that ABC is proposing, a company could not actually meet all the requirements of section F before you get the license, 10F on page 32, because you can't comply with 10F until you get the license. So in my opinion, once you get the license,
Where's 10F?
10F is on page 32.
33?
Well,
No, 33.
it's on 33 on my copy. It's 32 on yours.
Keep going.
Okay, so once a license is issued, all these provisions of the other provisions, including 10F, would have to be complied with. It's just they can't do it before they get the license. And
So Sarah, the computer has decided it's going to do an automatic update in 3 minutes, and at that point, we will lose, 13 minutes, so if we move quickly, we can get through this.
okay, this happened what, a year and a half ago? All right.
Yes.
So that is where, and then under C, you take a look at 9C. We kind of need some kind of backup plan for if the applicants next in line don't meet the requirements of subsection A, for some reason aren't going to get the license. My thought is, okay, at that point, the commission can either select the licensee from the next in highest scoring unselected applicant on the reserve list, or solicit new applications in accordance with these rules, which I believe would give the commission the opportunity to select a new license under the lottery rules.
So let me just interject, if we do lose, this computer does restart at this point. This has happened before, about a year and a half ago. It's a forced reboot that the IT guys have set in place after hours. So we can all reconnect. So if we lose you all, we will go back into the go-to as soon as the computer restarts, and it, knock on wood, last time reconnected without a problem, and we had everybody back in place. So those of you that are online, just keep that in mind. When as soon as the computer is back up, we as the host will restart that go-to meeting, and you should, as long as you don't cancel out of it, should be able to stay on board with us. So just to point out on section C, the position that we have, Chip and I looking at it, have said is that it's the desire of the commission to use the unselected applicants, the reserve pool, and so we think that it's inconsistent with section 9G2 if we move to the option of a new application. So that's generally the position that Chip can add more detail if you would like on that as well.
I want to add.
And one thing to keep in mind too, is this is not the final draft. We still have to go through governor's approval and promulgation, so this can be changed later, okay, down the road, okay, once we receive public comments and whatnot.
So exactly what changes do you want to make
So
on here?
the changes that you have in your hand right there is the changes that I recommended.
Okay.
And then if this right here is a copy of Sarah's changes.
Did you send a marked up version, because the version I got from you is not marked up.
So that's why I have a printed out version for them, is when I changed it to Adobe, it made it all black. And so I sent out, as I was going out the door, I saw that, and so I sent out the marked up version just in Word to Commissioner Thomas and Commissioner Mobley, because they notified me they were gonna be online, and then I had a copy of the marked up versions here for those appearing in person. If I can make a recommendation, how long do we have, Chip?
9 minutes.
Okay, 3 minutes.
I misread his flips over there. He said 13, not 3. So we'll just continue until it restarts and then stop the meeting and reset it.
Okay, this is all the changes.
Yeah.
That y'all have discrepancies on.
I don't know.
That's all the changes that, yes, the 9. I put over there. 9C, the section 9 is the only one that we have the discrepancies on. 9H. 9H.
Okay,
Just, Commissioner, just so for your acknowledgement, we do have, Dragon Cintiq is online and has requested to speak to these rules.
okay, well, real quick, commissioners, want to make sure that you're following what's going on. We have, 2 sets of suggestions, one by the Attorney General's office, the other one's by staff. And, want to make sure you all have copies of each one of them. Commissioner Russell. Commissioner Mobley, do you have a copy?
Yes, I do.
Okay, Commissioner Thomas?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, I just want to make sure that you had both versions. I'm gonna go ahead and let Mr. Vicente speak and give his position on these rules.
Good afternoon. I'm Dragon Vicente with Green Springs and Hot Springs. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, medical marijuana commissioners, for allowing me to speak on behalf of Green Springs Medical Dispensary located in Zone 6 and the patients of Arkansas. The last medical marijuana commission board turned down twice Green Remedy's request for a 5th dispensary in Zone 6 after I explained the demographics and the rural makeup of Zone 6 to the commission. Hot Springs has a population of 37,000 people, and the area west is very rural and sparsely inhabited. A 6th dispensary was not needed those 2 times and is not needed now. Zone 6 already has 5.
Mr. Vicente, I would ask for you to please speak to the rules. We've already voted on opening up the zone 6 and 8 to expand to 5 dispensaries. So if you would, please stick to the rules and what your issues are with the rules.
I was getting to that part. I believe in one of the rules under in subsection H, it states the commission may initiate the selection process for dispensary licenses upon determining that there are not enough dispensaries to supply the qualifications within the state or upon revocation of any existing license by the Alcoholic Beverage Control Division. That rule is not being followed since a prudent person can ascertain from the 40-mile range that I was discussing, that analysis hasn't been determined that a 5th dispensary needs to be there. And there's there are 2 dispensaries in Hot Springs. There's one in Alexander, there's one in Hensley, and there's one in Arkadelphia, which actually isn't in Zone 6. It's in Zone 7, but it's within a 40-mile range of Hot Springs. So that rule is not being met, why basically a 6th dispensary is being put in Hot Springs.
I don't know where to begin on this one. So what's your issue with these rules? You're talking about, there's nothing in here about 40 miles.
Well, no, there's nothing in there about 40 miles, but I was trying to explain that in the rules of Section 5, Part 9, under section H, it states upon determining that there are not enough dispensaries to supply qualified patients. And so I'm trying to explain that we already have enough dispensaries in zone 6 because the area is so small and it's rural. We already have the 4 dispensaries, and like I said, the Arkadelphia one is the 5th one that's all servicing zone 6. So we already have 5 dispensaries, and they're all put in a 40-mile range. And I believe that Green Remedies was the next one in line, and they had placed Hot Springs Village as their location, and that would in itself put a 6th dispensary within the 40-mile range, and that doesn't meet the rule that determines the necessity for enough dispensaries for qualified patients.
Well, thank you for your comments, Commissioner. Do you have any questions?
I do not.
Seeing no questions, let's move back to the rules. And like Sarah said, we can change these at public comment period. But it's my opinion, we need to get one of these sets of rules out, and I'll entertain a motion on which one you want to vote on.
So what how do we want to make this motion on either staff or AG?
Yeah, I'm making a motion on staff or staff rules or AG rules.
All right, both of them, I think I'm gonna go with the staff. I'll make a motion to go with the staff rules. And any future comments or whatever.
Right, and then that public comment, we can look at making changes. At least we have something that's gonna go out public comment into the governor's office, so.
We need to finalize them, we need to vote.
I have a motion that, I guess, accept the staff rules for public comment. How do you want to vote?
Sure, and I'll second that. So we have a motion on the table to accept staff rules. And we have a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
All right, motion carries, that we carry the staff recommendations. So,
We still have the lottery rules.
yes, that's,
3 minutes.
yeah, 3 minutes to go over lottery.
Okay, what I did here is, Rule 4 covers cultivators, Rule 5 covers dispensaries. I merged them into this proposed lottery rule, pointing out differences between cultivators and dispensaries as noted. I highlighted the rule provisions that are required by the Constitution. Okay, can't really mess with that. Okay, anything else is potentially up for discussion. Okay, so I just copied everything, including the merit criteria. So y'all can decide what you want the requirements for the applicant and the lottery system to be.
We just got the commissioners, we just got the lottery rules. I was wanting to make a suggestion that we postpone talking about the new lottery rules until the next meeting. That way we have time to read through them and look through them and make suggestions, those kind of things. Because I just got the lottery rules today, yesterday.
I think it was today. It was all today.
It's all water, but commissioners, are you okay with that?
I'm good with that.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay, you need a motion on that, we need to vote on that, or just call it table?
I think we'll just call it table.
Okay, we'll just call that table. Are there any other business to talk about?
So Sarah did provide a litigation.
Guess we lost them, huh?
Yeah, sounds like it. Guess we'll give it a few minutes.
Are you guys still there?
Yes.
Yes, I am.
I just didn't know how long it may take them to get it back up.
It said a few minutes, we'll see.
Lee, are you there?
Yeah,
Commissioner
yeah.
Wobbly, do we have you?
I'm here.
Commissioner Russell?
Yes, present.
Commissioner Thomas?
Yes, ma'am, I'm here.
We tried to push it through, we just didn't quite make it. As it cut off, I think we were discussing, saying that, Sarah had completed the litigation update.
And we may move, I don't know how much the litigation update means to you guys. We may even move the litigation update to quarterly instead of monthly.
Yeah, unless there's something pressing, maybe.
Right. And will that work, sir?
Of course, and anytime you guys have a question, just call me.
Okay.
We'll go and do that. I'm always available.
Me too.
Is there any other pressing stuff out there?
Now, the next meeting scheduled for November 4th at 4:30. All requests for agenda items must be submitted to the ABC by October 28th, 2021 at 4:30, close of business.
Was nothing else on the agenda? Meeting's adjourned.
Are we on the first Thursday of the month schedule now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks.
This conference is no longer being recorded.